And welcome to the program. Charles Moscowitz here, broadcasting live at YouTube and other subscribing platforms. It's an honor to welcome aboard Steve Turley. Steve is the author of numerous books. He is the host of Turley Talks on YouTube, which is going gangbusters, a great show. I recommend it highly. He's the author of such books as The Return of Christendom, Demography, Politics and the Coming Christian Majority, The New Nationalism, which is an interesting subject. Steve, thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Charles, great to be back with you as always.
You know, Steve, I look to your show as one of the programs that kind of bucks me up in these very difficult times. You really are informative and you bring up important information. But I have to say that right now I kind of am just shaking my head in wonder at either the possibility that the American people are so stupid that they would fall for this plot against such a successful president and vote against him, or this is a colossal case of an unprecedented case of ballot fraud, and that in fact the American people did vote for President Trump, but their vote has been subverted by a concerted effort to essentially overthrow the government and steal the government. What say you?
Right. Well, all you have to do is take a look at what the coup right after the election that we saw, the attempted coup right after the election, even before then, with the FBI sting operation, illegally spying on the Trump campaign, the whole Russian collusion fiasco nonsense. This is just a continuation of that. I mean, if you want some sort of set parameters to understand what happened on November 3rd, since 1860, the candidate that has won both Florida and Ohio has won 26 of 27 elections. The one exception was 1960, when John F. Kennedy basically stole the election by 100,000 votes, with votes in Chicago and LBJ finding some votes from in Dallas. We have 10 bellwether counties in our Rust Belts where, generally speaking, the candidate who wins the majority of those bellwether states goes on to win the general election virtually every single time. Donald Trump won 9 of those 10 states. The one exception was Sussex County in Delaware, since all of Delaware went for Biden. Other than that, all the other bellwether counties went with Trump. He won the top 5, for example, as well as 9 out of the 10. According to Richard Barris, who's one of the best number crunchers out there, Biden underperformed in every single municipality in our nation as compared to 2016 numbers, except for 4 municipalities: Madison, Detroit, Philly, and Atlanta. And he didn't just overperform there, he super performed. He did better than any human being ever did in the history of our nation. And plus, everyone saw right before their very eyes the asymmetrical calling of states, where states like Florida, where Trump won by nearly 4 points, or Texas, where he won by 8, or Ohio, where he won by 8. The decision desk sat on those states for hours upon hours, where all of a sudden, for example, with Arizona, right after the polls closed, right around 9 or 10 o'clock Eastern time, Fox News inexplicably calls it for Biden. So these are parts of the patterns that this is a radically irregular election. And it does beg the question, wait a minute now, maybe something else is going on here. And that's precisely what Giuliani and the legal team are arguing, that we're seeing. We're having hundreds of affidavits coming out under penalty of perjury. Let's say we've seen eyewitness, thousands upon thousands of examples of illegalities in the election process, particularly in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. We have the bizarre inconsistencies going on with Dominion voting systems that flipped red votes to blue. And then we have the Supreme Court taking very seriously an egregious violation of the Constitution by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, in effect moving the election day when Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution gives state legislatures alone the authority to designate the time, place, and manner of elections. So we've got a lot of things going on. This election's not over yet, even although, because we're living in an age of the partisanization of knowledge, even although, all of our globalist structures, whether it's our government, whether it's our media, our universities, Hollywood and the like, they've all coronated Biden, but he does not have, if you don't have electors appointed because you don't have the election certified, he ain't walking anywhere near the White House. So this isn't over yet.
Okay. I mean, if you listen to the mainstream media, the Mockingbird media, people like Lester Holt and the 6 o'clock news, they make it sound exactly like it's over. And they've never said anything positive about Trump anyways. Even during the Abraham Accords, they couldn't bring themselves to say anything. And they just act like it's a fait accompli. They refer to Biden as president-elect, which is technically untrue and dishonest because there is no president-elect right now. We have basically a two-pope system. There's no decision. And what Fox News did is the same thing Dan Rather did during the Bush-Gore race when he declared Florida before the polls closed in the Western Panhandle. It's an absolute scandal, really. Now, there are several things, as you say, Steve, that are working in favor of getting to the truth on this stolen election. The first one is that President Trump's team, headed up by Giuliani, has filed a major case in Detroit, in Wayne County, in the Eastern District of the Federal Court of Michigan, that includes over 500 affidavits. And an affidavit is a sworn testimony, sworn under the pain of perjury, to people who had witnessed voter fraud. He says that if we have even a semblance of an honest federal judiciary, they are going to let this go forward. It's a very strong case that this happened. And if it does go forward, then we're going to have a chance to investigate what actually happened in Detroit with the arrival of those ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning, all made out to Biden and only Biden, and other irregularities. And that could result in the throwing out of at least 100,000, if not 300,000 artificial fraudulent votes. And that could turn Michigan to Trump. The second thing is, as you mentioned, this domain software, which is very suspect. Now, I have been told by people who are partisan for Biden that this is a conspiracy theory that has been debunked. There's nothing to the business of the domain software. And they point to the Secretary of State of Michigan, who says this was not domain software in Antrim County that flipped 6,000 Trump votes to Biden. This was a technical mistake on the part of local poll people. So this is, to my way of thinking, a major potential scandal. I mean, I think that it was Sidney Powell, the attorney for Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who said that this could have been the cause of up to 2.7 million votes, not switched for Biden, but literally expunged from the system. Now, I'm not saying that that's true, but is there going to be an investigation, not to mention the connections that this organization has to the Chinese communists and to the Clinton Foundation and other corrupt entities? Is this going to be investigated? Are we going to ever get to the bottom of that?
Well, we'll see. Well, it's certainly being brought up. Giuliani's bringing this up. These are bombshell allegations that he's been bringing up with Lou Dobbs and Maria Bartoloma. And I think there's a couple of people on Fox that are trying to save the network right now, whether it's Tucker or, I mean, talk about a Hindenburg. I mean, this thing. I mean, I think the Titanic had a better outworking than Fox is having right now. So, yeah, we'll have to see. I mean, that this is going to be brought up in court. I've also, to my astonishment, I am witnessing left-wing media claiming that those concerned about voting systems are engaged in conspiracy theories. These are the people that were telling us for 3 years that Donald J. Trump's campaign colluded with Russia to win the 2016 election. And then afterward, Trump was basically a puppet of Putin. I mean, that's
right. That he was a
that's
spy
the
for the Russians.
absurdity of this world in which we're living. It's I guess the old saying is it's whatever they're accusing us of doing, that's exactly what they're doing.
Well, and also many of our fellow radio talk show hosts on the left, people like Tom Hartman and David Pakman and Schultz and others, for years were talking about how computers were secretly owned by Republicans and conservatives, and that they had tried to switch the vote away from Obama. So these same people are now silent on the issue of this domain software. If it is going to court, they better get going pretty quickly. Right. There's not a lot of time left. This thing could be a huge scandal, whether or not President Trump wins. God forbid he doesn't. But even if he doesn't, this is something that's going to have to be investigated, or else we'll never have another free election in this country.
Right.
Now, the third point I wanted to ask is about the Georgia recount. Now, the Georgia recount is interesting. You got Doug Collins heading up the Republican team, who's a very straight shooter, good guy. He led the effort to expose the perfect phone call scandal. And there is evidence that upwards of 100,000 people in Georgia voted who were over 90 years old, including several who were over 100 years old. Now, I heard that in the course of the recount, they're going to be called to find out if they're alive, and if so, did they in fact vote? And I think that could disqualify a lot of votes that might have been cast in their name, and that could help President Trump. What do you know anything about what's going on right now in Georgia? Because I think that is very key.
Yeah, well, actually, there's a bit of a siren call going on in Georgia that Dick Morris just posted a video that it's a fraud. The recount is an absolute fraud. So that's something all our listeners need to be taking seriously. If you go to dickmorris.com, he has a really good quick video on it and gives you phone numbers to call. Because in many ways, a lot of these are faux Republicans who are in the end they're just literally recounting, and there are no Republicans who are overseeing the process in any significant way. And they actually have some video to show that. We have table after table lined up of people recounting the ballots, throwing them in to bins, and there's absolutely no supervision from any kind of Republican official. So people are like, you need to call Georgia right now. So we'll see on that. But absolutely, I mean, the basic thesis is that if you audit the votes and count every single legal vote, President Trump will win hands down, just like he won in Florida, Texas, Ohio, Iowa. Remember, Iowa hadn't voted for a Republican president in 30 years. If I recall, Iowa was one of the 10 states that voted for Dukakis in 88. So in 2016, that was a shocker that they would vote for Trump. And they did so again by around 10 points, if I recall, in 2020. So if we are able to count and that's what everybody here should want. We just want every legal vote counted. That's it. Our concern, and the concern of 73 million Americans who voted for Trump more than any sitting president in history, is that is not happening, that there are games being played by a bunch of never-Trumpers who would rather tear our nation apart than have 4 more years of Trump. And this is very serious, because I think, Charles, you've gotten to the heart of the matter. How could we? This is the one thing we've got. We got voting. We can't change CNN. We can't change Disney. We can't change Netflix. We can't change the NBA. We can't change the NFL. We can't change universities. We can't change Hollywood. We can't change the medical industry or scientific industry. We can't change. We can tune out. We could go monastic mode. and just tune out of all that, live our lives, work hard, provide for our families, fellowship with our friends, our faith communities and the like. The one thing we got is we can vote. The one thing we got is to be able to get out there and say, hey, screw you, I'm voting for so-and-so. If they take that one thing away, what do we have left? It's a total disenfranchisement of any sense of democratic integrity. And that I just don't see how that in any way ends well in any outworking. I just don't see it. So
no, it's a disaster. And as you say, we're simply looking for an honest count of the vote. I think that Trump did better in probably every state, even in my own home state here of Massachusetts. Trump got less than 1 million votes in 2016. This time he got a little over 1 million votes. Now, I don't think there was domains, software is not in this state. I think the state's fairly honest. Most of the ballots are cast by hand. There's not a lot of electronics involved. And so I think that's actually a fairly honest reading of probably what happened in all 50 states, which is that Trump did better in every state, including the very blue liberal states like Massachusetts. And, I do think that there is something to this idea that millions of Trump votes have disappeared. It just makes sense to me, because why would, therefore, the Republicans do so well down ticket? And there are still unresolved seats in the U.S. House, but they already have picked up, I think, at least 10 seats in the House, and they've held on to the Senate, and they've increased their margins on state races. And it's just the idea that Biden would have gotten 4 million more popular votes as opposed to Hillary getting 3 million. I mean, I can't imagine him doing better than Hillary on the popular vote. I can't imagine him doing as well in California as Hillary did. It just doesn't make sense. There's something about this that stinks. It's
right.
like something is rotten in Denmark, as Shakespeare would say.
Yeah, you got it. And again, we have some fixed indicators, the winner of Florida and Ohio. Again, it's almost written in stone. If you win both Florida and Ohio, unless it gets fixed like in the 1960s, you're going to win the general election. These are just basic bellwethers. Trump, I mean, again, you have to ask yourself the question, why is it that Iowa went for Trump by about 10 points, but Wisconsin and Michigan don't? What's going on there? Ohio goes for Trump by 8 points. When have we seen Ohio, Wisconsin go to the right of Michigan and Pennsylvania and Wisconsin? So did I say Ohio and Iowa, I should say, and go to the right of Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania? I mean, these are just very strange. These are very strange anomalies. Even Georgia itself, during the so-called blue wave of 2018 went thoroughly Republican, as did Florida, by the way. Florida, Trump increased his, he won by 130,000 votes in 2016. He blew it out of the water this time, winning by almost 4% in Florida with this mass turn.
Incredible.
Of Hispanics, Latinos, Cubans.
Blacks,
absolutely.
He even got my fellow Jews.
He did, and I was watching that. I did. So one of the, you and I have probably talked about this. One of the theses that are out there is the religious shall inherit the earth thesis, that the more religiously conservative you are, the more children you're having. And the less religiously conservative, the less children you're having. And so one of the arguments is that when you look at, for example, in the Jewish population, you see how many children the Orthodox Jews are having in New York City, or even in Israel proper. You're seeing this massive movement of the Haredi Jewish community growing, the secular Jewish community shrinking. And that's a microcosm of the world as a whole. So conservative Christians and lukewarm Christians, conservative Muslims, lukewarm Muslims, it's the same kind of thing. And we're seeing, of course, Orthodox Jews voting for Trump upwards of 80% or so.
Something like that.
That's the future. So as frustrating as this is, and it is very, very frustrating, if we keep our focus on the long range, the long view, things are in our favor. They are moving.
Oh, they are culturally, but Steve, no matter how much success we may have, we cannot stop anything if they're going to steal elections.
Exactly.
And that's what we're looking at. And you
Yeah.
also mentioned the phenomena of these traitorous, Trump-hating Republicans, people like Ben Sasse and Mitt Romney, who are trying to undo attempts by the Trump administration to bring their legal cases, which are important cases, and also to bring this to the Supreme Court. And I wonder how much of a hand they might have played in the recount in Arizona, which had enormous irregularities, to put it mildly. I mean, I read articles where this woman shows up to vote, and she said, "Oh, you can't vote. You've already voted." I mean, this is like an elderly woman. And so she goes to a judge, and the judge says, "Sorry, you voted already. You'll have to wait till next time." I mean, this is just, I know I'm bringing up an anecdote here, but this is something that I think almost borders on systemic in both Arizona and Nevada. And I think that, to question that this is possible, you just need to take a look at the hatred and the fear and the loathing that these people had, not necessarily for Donald Trump as a person, which they do have, but for the whole agenda that he stood for, the nationalist agenda. The idea of putting America first is something that they despise.
Yeah.
And so therefore they feel morally justified in terms of doing whatever they need to do to stop this. And they've tried to do that. And I think that's exactly what's happening right now. And we have to do something about it.
Yeah.
We cannot let this stand. The final state that I want to ask you about is Pennsylvania, because it's so obviously corrupt. You have a governor who and a state Supreme Court who overturned the will of the state legislature, which is utterly unconstitutional. And I think if this reaches the Constitution, they're going to unanimously throw that out. All of them are, because this is like asking them, can the president serve a 5-year term?
Right.
It's just there. It's not something that's up for interpretation. This is black and white. Do you think it's going to reach the Constitution? I mean, the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Right. It's almost like a driver's test question. If you're going to be a Supreme Court judge, okay, here you go. A Secretary of State or a state Supreme Court moves an election date after it's been set by a legislature. Is this A, unconstitutional? B, yeah, it's
exactly.
Sam Alito's. It's a quick write-up. It's only about 4 pages, but it's very good. It's very clear statement that Sam Alito, I think he was acting they act as circuit court judges?
Right. He's assigned Pennsylvania. They all have the assignments for special cases in all the states. He happens to be assigned Pennsylvania, fortunately. I'd hate to think if it was Roberts.
Oh my, yeah, right. Right. Well, hopefully he's going to be the most irrelevant person on the planet now that they've seated ACB. But yeah, definitely, I'm noticing when you read this, I don't know, you call it a briefing or order or what have you. It's done on behalf of Gorsuch and why am I forgetting his name? Our other conservative, Clarence Thomas. I don't know.
Thomas. Yeah.
I've got my too many names swirling, but he writes on behalf of them. Amy Coney Barrett was recused at the time because she was getting updated on things and briefed on things, which usually takes about 2 weeks. That's standard. She won't be out of it when this comes to them, as I understand it. But yeah, if for your listeners, if they just want to look up Sam Alito, Act 77, it's a very interesting. My daughter's into law, and college, so I enjoy kind of chatting with her on this. But he made it clear that what the Supreme Court did does appear to be in just a flagrant violation of the Constitution. He actually said this. He said, I think it's Article 1, Section 4. Empowers state legislatures alone to set the date, the time, and the manner of any election. And if courts could step in anytime they want and by judicial fiat decree redo that date, he said that in effect negates Article 1, Section 4. There's no point for it. And it makes absolute sense. The only way that the state legislatures could have sole authority to set the date, time, and manner of an election is if they alone set the date, time, and manner of the election. If somebody else comes in and does do-over, it completely negates that section of the federal Constitution. So that will most likely get overturned. So that has to do with the deadline, as you know, of the when the ballots were supposed to come in. All ballots needed to be received by 8 p.m. on November 3rd. That's the moment that the polls close, precisely in order to avoid these 4 a.m. dumps that we've been seeing.
That's right.
And for whatever reason, the 4 liberals on their court, a 4-3 decision. So Pennsylvania votes directly for their Supreme Court, their state Supreme Court, on a down ticket. They run as Democrats and Republicans, and for whatever reason, they decided to change that date to 3 days after. And so we've already had that decision handed down by the court that if you were trying to cure any identity issues, so if you send in a ballot and the signatures didn't match up or something with the signature that they had on file, you had 6 days to clear that out, or the ballot would be cast out. Again, the Secretary of State came in and said, oh, okay, well, we can move that date too to 3 days after what the legislature had decided. So the most recent decision on this, actually the first decision on this, more or less, on the cases that the legal team has brought, has thrown out those ballots that came in by virtue of the Secretary of State messing around with time, place, and manner. And I think we're going to see the same thing. That's telegraphing what we're going to see with the Supreme Court, how they'll probably throw out those ballots. If that's the case, I don't know. I've heard conflicting numbers. I have heard numbers of upwards of 600,000 ballots coming in after 8 p.m. November 3rd. That would change the election right there.
Oh yeah. Well, before the we all went to bed on that midnight, Trump was ahead by at least 500,000 votes in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it was 700. If I recall, it was 700,000 when we were going to bed. I had to sack around 2 or 3, and it was 700,000.
And then, of course, they changed that law, the Secretary of State, 2 days before the election on late Sunday night. And those 3 extra days allowed them to keep counting and keep counting and keep counting until they were able to get their number on Saturday. And then the media was able to go out, 3 members of the media, 3 media institutions, declaring Biden the winner. Right. While none of the other media institutions have hopped on board that at this time, which is something people need to understand. But the fact is that they created this unprecedented situation, like the Israelis like to say, facts on the ground. They've created this sense that it's inevitable that Biden will be the president. And then you had these world leaders calling in and congratulating him, which is ridiculous. I mean, we shouldn't be here. They should mind their own damn business. And all these other factors, I mean, further solidifying this image, which I think every day that this goes by, it's going to make it more difficult for President Trump, because in the meanwhile, they're denigrating him every day. They're ignoring him. They're airbrushing him and his 71 million followers who voted for him out of the public square. So this is a critical time. I mean, this constitutes literally right before our eyes in real time an overthrow of the government. And if, God willing, Trump is certified as the next president, that's going to be a mess, because all this expectation is going to result in these radicals hitting the streets and looting Black businesses, burning Black neighborhoods, and killing Black people, just like they did last summer.
Yes. That's why I said I think we're dealing with a group of people that are more willing to tear the country apart than have 4 more years of Trump. And
Right.
that's,
And they
yeah,
mean business, and they're high. These are the top 1% wealthiest people colluding with, people inside the government, inside business, inside even major institutions, kind of almost working in tandem. Now, I'm not saying they're sitting around some smoke-filled room somewhere. I mean, but there is generally, it's like what they used to say about the communists. I mean, I remember my father's uncle was a member of the Communist Party, and he asked him once. He goes, "How do you guys function? Who tells you what to do? Do you get orders from the Kremlin?" And he goes, "No, we don't need to. We all think the same way, right?" I mean, this is what's going on here. There's almost like they don't even need smoke signals. They're all on the same page. They're all
right.
functioning in their own roles, and they're all doing what they need to do to make sure that this happens. It's the headless revolution.
Yeah, telekinetic in a sense. Yeah, yeah.
So, Steve, what do you think is going to happen now? I mean, you are a voice of inspiration in these times, and you're very dependable in that way. So, lay it on me. What's going to happen?
Well, I can tell you. So here's what they want. So what the Trump legal team wants to do is it's a two-front battle. They are pressuring state legislatures to get involved in recounts and recanvassing. Recanvassing is more important. So in other words, audits, examine the actual ballots. They want every legal vote counted at the instigation of Republican-led legislatures in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania and Georgia. And they know if that happens, that these states will flip. Once they flip, then Biden will flip out, and he will launch his counter suits in court, and this will all ultimately end up at the Supreme Court. And then the Supreme Court will most likely decide either in favor of one of those counts, most likely the audited count, that would be the more accurate one. They would favor in light of the audit count, or they are going to declare the votes to be invalid because there's just too much ambiguity in those states. If that happens, no candidate reaches 270 electoral votes. That means it's got to go to the House of Representatives. I think this is Article 12 in the Constitution. So got to go to the House of Representatives. And when it goes to the House of Representatives, every state gets a delegation that gets one vote. Mm-hmm. Every state gets a delegation that gets one vote. So California gets one vote, Delaware gets one vote. And right now we've got, if I recall, 31 Republican states versus 19 Democrat states. Trump wins in a blowout there.
Now,
so
that's state legislators, right?
State legislatures will send the delegates. Exactly.
Because I mean, Massachusetts has a Republican governor, but
to be the legislatures. Yeah, governor. Right. So executives are powerless in this process. Even the House of Representatives, the Speaker of the House, as I understand, is relatively powerless. So Nancy Pelosi would have to preside over watching this whole thing. So that's what they're going for. That's the trajectory. And the argument, Steve Bannon is making the argument that if you think it through, we've got the state legislatures, right? We've got the Supreme Court, we've got the Senate, we've got all the power structures we need in place in order to make this happen. So the only way Trump loses in this kind of clean scenario is if he concedes, and of course he's not going to do that. Mm-hmm. So what are the snags? The snags are that, like this recount in Georgia, they could botch the recount and just basically give you the same numbers as they did before. Or you could have these never Trumpers get involved and start messing things up at the legislative level. And then the Supreme, there's no guarantee of how the Supreme Court is going to rule. They may in the end rule just for Biden, because you do have the historical precedent that there has never been an overturning of an election. Although, again, I don't know if that's necessarily applicable now. I don't think the election has actually been decided outside of the AP, for example. Mm-hmm. So anyway, it's a narrow gate. but it's a very real one. And if everything falls into line, President Trump will be reelected. He will take the oath of office on the 20th. And what we just have to do is we have to watch how that process works itself out. So I'll be on top of it each day, giving updates. I know you will as well, because our listeners right now, Charles, as you know, they're starving for real news. They're not getting it from the mainstream media. It's been cut off from them. So they're coming to us, they're coming to the alt media. And so we're going to give it to, we're going to give them this drama that's playing itself out. And so we'll see. I can't guarantee it, but it's, I know Trump's team seems very confident, and he's definitely somebody you never count out.
That's right. I mean, that's why Fox News is going the way of the dodo bird right now. And also, I mean, Trump is who he is. I mean, they didn't expect that he's going to roll over. You don't F around with Trump. You know, it's not, I mean, Nixon rolled over in 1960. Now, that doesn't mean Kennedy wasn't a great man. I love Kennedy, but nevertheless, I mean, clearly it was stolen. And, Nixon, I guess, figured he'd have his time later, which he did. But Trump isn't of that mindset. You know, he's a pugilist. He's going to go out and fight and make sure that this is exposed. And it's very important that it is for both liberals and conservatives, because we cannot have in this country stolen elections. That is a precedent we cannot allow to stand. So, if you're liberal, fine. Don't, have a clean election. And if Trump wins, you'll come back 4 years from now.
Right.
That's how the system should work. Anyway, Steve, let my listeners know where they can view you and listen to you.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
They can go to my website, Turley Talks, last name, Turley Talks, like TEDTalks.com, or just go to YouTube and just punch in Dr. Steve Turley. Tons of videos there and resources and the like.
Very important stuff. Steve, always a pleasure and an honor. I really appreciate you coming on with me today.
Right back at you, Charles. Thank you so much for all that you do.